All right, all my party people in the place to be. I chat with Malachi Ward this week. Let's do it. Hey guys, welcome to the show. Malachi Ward. Malachi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am not too bad. I'm glad I
Yeah.
didn't call you Malachi, like you were saying before we started. Some people butcher your name every so often, I'm assuming.
It happens. It doesn't bother me though. I'm not too intense about name pronunciation. I realize people may not encounter it as much.
Oh yeah, for sure. So you're in California, right? You're in LA?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Awesome, man. So for those that don't know, Malachi is an artist. Would you consider yourself primarily a comic book artist or just like you're an artist in general? I know you do a lot of design work, just elaborate on that.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of illustration work. I do think of myself, I guess, mostly as a cartoonist, like writing and drawing
Mhm.
the comics. That's kind of the main thing that I love. But the last few years, I've just been drawing comics and doing illustration um, for animation and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So the last few years, it definitely has mostly just been Illustrator. Yeah.
Now, did you grow up a comic fan or was this something you kind of stumbled into like later on in life?
I did grow up a comic fan,
Mhm.
but mostly the comics that I was really into were more like newspaper strips. So
Okay.
I'm like at just the right age where Calvin
Mhm.
and Hobbes was, insane, just like my
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
world.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
and I loved a lot of superhero characters, but it was a lot, it was from like the X-Men cartoon was big, the Batman cartoon was big. So I knew all and it was just like, trading cards and all that kind of stuff. Like it was just huge at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I had some comics, but I wasn't like a collector as a kid. I just
Okay.
kind of had 20 or 30 comics that I loved. Uh, but it wasn't until high school that I started um, really like following a series, and that
Mhm.
was I think it was initially the when Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada were on Daredevil,
Okay, yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
it went from that to I think Bendis was like
Yeah.
right after that. And so that like the Bendis run was really good. So I just like followed through with all the
Oh
Daredevil
yeah.
stuff. And I really liked the was it David Mack? The he who would do like the watercolor and uh like collage and stuff like
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
in the book. So I was really, really into that. Yeah, and then in college I started getting more into like Hellboy and finding sort of an even broader kind of world of comics of
Mhm.
like some of the older newspaper strips, like getting really into like Crazy Cat and like
Oh wow, yeah.
Windsor McKay and stuff like that, and then from that into like Chris Ware and Kevin
Yeah.
Idzenga, so more of that kind of world, and still sort of I think maybe identify with that realm of comics
Yeah.
the most. Yeah.
I always found that fascinating. Like, I wish I had a deeper knowledge of like the strip style of work. But when you said, Calvin and Hobbes, it took me back to being a kid, going to the library with my mom, and then like I would get all the Calvin and Hobbeses, all the Far Sides I could carry, and there was a few
Yeah.
more like kind of like nestled away, like in there. Like my mom loved Prince Valiant, like
Oh yeah.
that was like her thing, and like I remember like the Flash Gordons too, because they still printed them in like you had no idea how old they were either. Like they were still reprinted in
Yeah.
like the newspaper, like when we were kids, like in the Daily News and stuff in New York. So I like that idea. So you were around superheroes and got the idea of the heroes, but are more leaning towards cartooning.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're like a kid in the 90s too, like it's very easy to not read that many comic books and
Oh
still be
yeah.
like hyper aware of all of the kind of central points of mythology for,
Yes.
all the
Yeah.
major superhero characters. So I still, and and I would like try to create my own like superhero universe and stuff like that, when I was a kid. And even though I didn't have a ton of comics, the comics I did have, I did read very obsessively, but it was a lot of like, it was a lot of me just filling in the blanks, like I would have like my
Yeah.
memory of this Clone Saga is based on like two kind of random issues and then
Oh,
just
for
my
sure.
imagination of what what was happening in between those.
Yeah.
um which is kind of a fun, I don't know, sometimes when people get really tied up in like reading every issue, and I mean it's just sort of the way that modern people read comic books, they want to
Yeah.
start from the beginning and go through, which I think is a little, is kind of too bad, because I think there is some real magic to just hopping on a random issue mid
Yeah.
story and just kind of going with it.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I feel like that's how I grew up reading comics. I have an older brother, so like I inherited a lot of his stuff, but because he was like a little bit older than me, and it was like going to college and then coming back, the stuff I inherited from him was like very like gaps in issues, you know. I still have
Right.
all that stuff, and it's interesting because like you said, like I talk with my buddies who kind of had the same experience where it's like that Web of Spider-Man run from like the mid 90s where it's like Tombstone and like the Werewolf, the Lobo brothers and all that stuff. I know I don't have all those issues, but I'm like, oh yeah, this is what happened and then this happened and you get the bullet points, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's fun to go back, you know?
It's also funny how like there are certain characters that in my mind are just as kind of iconic and
Mhm.
huge as any of the major characters, because they took up, they were in one issue of the 20 that I had, so they're a
Yeah.
20th of the mythology in my mind. But like, so to me, like what, I think it was an X-Men comic, I think it was called Executioner's Song.
Yeah.
I can't, but the character in that just had like this really cool, I can't I mean it's been years since I've even looked at it, but he had a really cool costume. The art was great.
Hmm.
And so like that guy, it's like a huge character in my mind, but I don't think, I mean obviously that there's no kind of end to the depth of like the mania of a X-Men fan. So
Yeah.
obviously he's huge for plenty of people. Um
Do you remember what he looked
but
like?
um he and part of the reason that he was cool is that it wasn't like a super simple costume, but he
Uh-huh.
had kind of like a staff and some like gauntlets and like a crazy mask, and almost had kind of like a bird like look to him.
Okay.
Let me um look him
Yeah.
up.
I would love to know because like all that again, like that's I have all that stuff when from being a kid and I know I'm missing tons of issues, you know, but again,
Right.
like you go back and you're like, oh man, like I remember like all this stuff with Cable and Strife and then like all this nonsense with Professor X and Shatterstar and like all those guys that came from like different dimensions, you know.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I'm even remembering it wrong. I think I'm mixing up the name of the guy with like an event name. Uh,
Was it Donatello from the Ninja Turtles?
there he is. Yeah, the executioner,
Okay.
Carl Denty. Uh, yeah, he has this like long kind
Mhm.
of like almost like a
Like a plague doctor type mask.
sort of it's like if Grifter, like if it was like a flowing, like if it went a lot longer.
I know exactly. All right, I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, no, you know, let's touch on that too, because I think again, like similar kind of things. Like I remember getting those old issues of Justice League International and thinking every single one of those characters was like as big a deal as
Yeah,
everybody else, you know.
yeah, yeah.
And then like when you get older, you're like, oh, that was just a really good comic book, you know.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So if you're ever reading an X-Men comic sometime in the future and Executioner shows up, it probably means that I made it onto an X-Men book.
That's your that's your guy.
Yeah,
So so how did you get started doing cartooning like professionally?
yeah. Professionally, well, I did it because I was kind of coming from that like uh small press and like zine world.
Hmm.
For a while I was just printing stuff up myself, making these kind of like one-off short stories and stuff like that,
Uh,
going to conventions. So my first convention was the Alternative Press Expo in San Francisco. I
okay.
think that was in like 2009. And yeah, just bringing, stuff that I printed up at the college print shop.
Hmm.
And then I think eventually started did some backup comics in Profit
Okay.
for Image Comics. So just these like 5 page little
Yeah.
comics, and then from there started doing like fill in, because that run of Profit was very like collaborative. So we would do like
Yeah.
5 or 6 of the actual pages, and then 10 of the actual pages in an issue, and stuff like that. And from
That was the
there,
one where he was stuck on that planet, right?
yeah, it's
Okay.
like he wakes up and there's like a bunch of different Prophet clones kind of
Okay.
spread across the galaxy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, we did that, and that kind of led to doing. I often collaborate with Matt Sheen, so we were doing that Prophet stuff together.
Hmm.
That led to collaborating on one of our own books called Ancestor.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, and it's just kind of been one thing after another
Kind of snowballing
since
from there.
then. Yeah, yeah,
You did stuff for Ad House too. Like I remember like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I would get like years and years ago, I would get everything that they put out, because it was just so unique and like so eclectic. And
yeah,
it went from like, like a lot of indie guys to like a lot of like pretty like big time names would like do books for them. So
yeah.
was that like one of your ways in to the industry also?
Yeah, we had known Chris Pitzer, who runs Ad House, from doing shows, and he'd been picking up the zines. And after Ancestor, we our friend Simon Roy, great cartoonist, was kind of like, you have to put out. Matt and I, the first thing we did when we collaborated was a series called Expansion that we just it was
Okay.
one of those books that we printed up on our own. Um, and Chris Pitzer had helped us distribute that, like to get
Hmm.
it into more stores and stuff. So it wasn't just us like manually wholesaling it. Um, and so Simon was kind of like, you gotta like collect that and put it out now that Ancestors come out.
Hmm.
And so it made sense to go to Chris first at Ad House to try and get that collected.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a really great process because Chris Pitzer is a graphic designer, and so we got to like make the book exactly how we want it. That's sometimes not an option in the
Right,
in
right.
the comics world.
Mm,
You can be sort of subject to some strict norms in terms
right.
of like how things are printed and what
Yeah.
size they're printed at and everything. So for Expansion, we got to really make it kind of like a nice product. And yeah, so that was great. And then yeah, we get to be alongside, on the Ad House roster with really fantastic cartoonists,
Mhm.
which is really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Tell me about your process. Like, are you traditional like pen and ink or a combination of pen and ink and digital? Like, what do you do?
For a long time, I was strictly traditional.
Mm.
I think I think a lot of younger artists are kind of this way, where they have very
Mhm.
like idealistic
Yeah.
kind of process rules. And I was very much that way, where I was like, I use this brush and I use this ink, and I
Yeah.
do it the old school way. And that kind of that slowly kind of hybridized where I would like do pencils in the computer and then print them out and ink over
Mhm.
them. Um, and eventually, once I started doing more animation work and like was just all of that needed to be completely on the computer, and I
Yeah.
kind of developed a process, a digital process that I was more comfortable with and
Mhm.
was happy with the result. Um, I eventually just started like all of the Black Hammer stuff is completely start to finish digital,
Oh, really?
um, which I enjoy. It like to me, it's the most fun way to make comics and
Uh-huh.
to illustrate. But at the same time, I do really miss having originals. I love
Yeah.
looking at originals. I love
Yeah.
making originals. So um, there's definitely a trade off that I feel mixed about, but it does make one of the best parts of going to conventions now for me is getting to do commissions because I
Okay.
usually don't have time for them, but I can do them at the show. And so getting to make physical drawings at the shows is really fun.
Does it mess you up sometimes? Are you like so used to how doing it digitally, and then like once you have like a pencil in your hand, you're like, oh shit, what do I do?
Right. You know, a lot of people that work digitally smartly really take advantage of the strengths of digital and
Mhm.
the process that is unique to digital. I have never been able to real like totally enmesh myself in the in digital process.
Uh-huh.
So my digital process is as close like I do everything as close to how I would do it in real life,
Okay.
just on the screen instead of on the paper. Um, so it actually doesn't mix me up as much as I would expect. Like I don't have every once in a while I'll make a mark and I'll be like, wish I had undo on that one, but um,
Yeah.
but that's sort of part of the fun of
Mhm.
especially like convention sketches where you're kind of moving fast, and so it's all sort of about incorporating every little bump in the process into the final
Mhm.
piece to kind
Yeah.
of try and make it better. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I won't lie. Like, there's been times where I've tried to
Does
zoom
it
in on it.
it doesn't work. Is it put your face
Yeah,
closer to
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Do you are you a fan of the convention scene? Do you like going to conventions and like meeting everybody?
Yeah, they can definitely be exhausting, but
Mhm.
and some of the like really big conventions are weirdly they're just harder to connect with even just
Yeah.
other comics friends and stuff like that because there's just so much going on. But like I'm about to head to Emerald City, and that's one of my favorite shows
Oh,
because
cool.
it's sort of just the right size of like
Yeah.
everybody's kind of in the same place. They're all
Mhm.
hanging out afterwards. The show isn't too packed or anything like
Yeah,
that, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
still busy enough that you get to have some fun. Yeah. But yeah, I like doing shows. Traveling can wear me down a little bit, so I don't do a ton. And I haven't like oriented myself towards like trying to make a ton of money at the shows. So financially, it doesn't make like a ton of sense.
Yeah,
Not that
yeah,
I like losing money, but it's just sort of like there's a huge incentive to like
yeah. Mhm.
hit like 20 shows a year or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I do like 3 or 4 shows a year, and they're always really fun.
It's like a breather from like work, right?
Yeah, and I think also that yeah, the work can be. I mean, it's good and bad, but it's pretty solitary, and
Mhm.
I think an important part of the process of making something like that is to let yourself sort of celebrate like
Mhm.
when you finish something and be like, okay, I did it. Like, and conventions are kind of good for that too, where you can sort of you know uh, acknowledge that you've done work that you like and that it's out in the world and stuff like that.
Yeah, and kind of have it in front of you and like have your stuff on the table.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so how did you end up doing the Star Trek covers, like the Star Trek work? Are you a big Trek guy, or did IDW reach out to you? Like what talk to me about that.
Yeah, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. That's kind of the only
Mhm.
thing that I when people talk about like real like I'm a fan of something,
Yeah.
that's like there's all sorts of stuff that I love uh that I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a part of the fan culture of
Okay.
that thing, even though like I love Alien or something like that, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily love it in the way that like some people have kind of like a fan love of like that
Mhm.
franchise or something. Star Trek though
Yeah.
is that thing for me where I just love every second of it. It doesn't matter how good or bad it is. I'm fully on board with
Yeah.
everything. I know a ton about it. Whenever there's a new show, I'm like watching it at midnight, like right when it
Yeah.
hits
Yeah.
streaming or whatever. Like I'm
Yeah.
totally obsessed. So I had done a lot of like Star Trek fan art and stuff like that, just
Yeah.
because I can't help myself. And Matt and I had done a couple of things at IDW for Star Trek a few years ago,
Mhm.
including we wrote and drew like a short story. But as things often go with like media companies, there's a changing of the guard and stuff
Right.
like
Yeah.
that. So we hadn't done anything in a while. Um, and I think Heather Antos had come on to Star Trek as an editor, and she has these really great like she is very ambitious in terms of like she
Mhm.
wants to make these Star Trek comics,
Yeah.
these great blockbuster comics, um, and so she was really on the lookout for all kinds of artists and all kinds of writers and stuff like that. And so I think she just saw some of the fan art that I had done online and asked if I wanted to do some covers. And of course, I don't know if I'll ever be able to say no to a Star Trek gig. So
What
I
like
immediately
what's
started doing them.
That's amazing. Like I'm a huge Star Trek guy also, and I'm very fortunate. My wife is also like super into Star Trek, so I have to wait for her to watch stuff, but that's also fine. And it's funny, like a few weeks ago, she's like, "Why do we have Paramount?" And I'm like, "Star Trek. It's got everything, you know."
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
she understood about that. But like, what has been like your favorite thing that you've drawn, or something that you hope to draw for the Star Trek universe? What's your thing? Like for example, like as far as like captains go, like my brother's favorite captain is Cisco, like it's, like everybody's like, you have Picard, you have all these, like, who are some of like your top guys that you, or girls or whatever, that you want to like creatively explore?
Yeah, well, I mean, I really do. I love all the characters so much. So, I mean, I love Picard. I love, you know, I love Tuvok. When we did our short story,
Uh,
we did young Janeway and Tuvok
mm,
sort of right after they had first met and
okay.
didn't like each other. And so we did a story of them sort of like starting to warm up to each other on a mission. And that
Yeah.
was really fun because the setting is that like early, like right before season 1 of Next Generation. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the time period. Um so like that's really fun. I love Tuvok. We Ro Laren might be my favorite character.
Oh, wow.
Doing a Ro Laren story would be really cool. I
Yeah.
also just like some of the corners. Like it would be really cool to do like an Enterprise C story
Yeah.
just before they get thrown. um, because I was just always so intrigued by like that captain. I love that ship
Yeah. Yeah.
design. Like I just always kind of wanted to see more of that crew and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Um, yeah, so I mean, it really could. I feel like there's sort of an endless amount of characters that I would love to work on. I've always sort of been interested in the Cardassians kind of earlier in their timeline because
Okay.
there are allusions to like the Federation has kind of known about them for a really
Yeah.
long time. I always thought it would be kind of interesting to see them maybe during the Enterprise, uh, like the NX Enterprise era,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
kind of see what they're like then. Um, but yeah, I mean, on and on.
That's all. Listen, I'm here for it. I love it all. Um, it's canon, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the IDW books are canon.
I mean, with anything canon, it's kind of hard.
Yeah,
It's hard to
the
say,
canon.
but
Yeah,
they are writing them as if they are canon, like they fit into canon
right, right.
really nicely. And yeah, I don't know if it's like officially canon. It could be. I'm not
Mm,
totally sure. Um, but I do know that um like Heather is the group editor for the Star
mm.
Trek stuff. She is kind of roped in with like
Making everything make sense,
the other
right?
decision
Yeah,
making that's
yeah,
happening in the shows and stuff like that. So they
yeah.
kind of can can fit it into the canon in that way.
And the comics are way better than the Star Trek comics that were put out in the 90s, I think. Like these IDW books, and especially like I'm a big fan of Defiant, and reading Defiant is like a Star Trek fan's wet dream, you know? Like
Yeah,
it's just like I remember like I did that first story arc. I was like, this is like everybody's here. This is amazing, you know? Like
yeah,
everything's
yeah, yeah.
seamlessly woven like into each other. Let's get off of Star Trek right now. I feel like I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours about Star Trek,
Oh yeah,
but talk to me. How did you get hooked up with Jeff Lemire doing Black Hammer?
that was another one where Jeff had I think been following some of my um, self published work,
Mm,
and I also I think the first time I really talked. Well, I don't know if that's true, but one of the first
mm.
interactions we had is I released a book of all the short stories. So you know, I had been just self-publishing all these little like 10 pages,
Yeah.
maybe once 20 pages, stuff like that, um, and collected them into a book called From Now On. And you know, I was trying to get some
Mm,
blurbs for the back of the book, and I knew that like I had talked to Jeff before that, and he very kindly wrote like a really great uh blurb for the back of the book. So we had kind of
mm,
been like in touch here and there um over the years. And then I think the editor Daniel Chabin at Dark Horse
mm.
had me on just to do like a variant cover, and that went well. And then they were doing the Black Hammer Visions, which
Yeah.
was a series of one shots where they had different writers
Mm,
kind of come in and do a story, and they asked Matt and I if we would be interested in illustrating one that Cullen Bunn wrote for the Cthulhu character, and it was just perfect little shorts, you know, one
yeah.
shot comic that Cullen wrote. So we're really excited to do that. And it was really fun one to draw, just lots of like very moody sewers and
Yeah.
cityscapes and stuff like that. And that went well. And then we did, I think, 4 issues of Black Hammer Reborn.
Mm.
And then these last 6 for the end came after that. Um, yeah, so it's another one of those things where you just kind of do one little thing and that leads to something that's a little bit bigger and the next thing's a
Yeah.
little bit bigger than that. Yeah.
That's got to be cool. Like
Um,
I was thinking about that this morning where, like for me, I think Black Hammer is up there as a whole with some of the best comics of all time, over like the last 50 years. And I wish more people read it, so that's got to be
yeah,
a cool feeling where you're like, holy shit, like I'm doing Black Hammer.
it was definitely the first time where, because it's such a cool series and
Mhm.
I'd never really done like a superhero comic at all.
Yeah.
Um, and even though they were giving a like Jeff writes way far ahead,
Mm,
and they schedule it out really far ahead. So like even though I wasn't like on a like actual monthly grind to like draw the books, Like the
Yeah.
fact that I was drawing like a monthly superhero book, it just was this really cool feeling of like stepping into a tradition
Hmm.
of, these incredible uh comic book artists, going back to the like the 30s,
Yeah.
that have been doing this work. And I don't know, like I have a very like romanticized kind of
Oh, for
idea
sure. Yeah.
about that kind of work. So it was just a really cool feeling to kind of like be a tiny little part of that tradition. And then, like you were saying, just this world of Black Hammer is so
Hmm.
cool, and the comics have been so good,
Yeah.
um, that it was also just really fun to like, and in a lot of ways, really easy to just kind of step in to that stream
Hmm.
and um, try and do our best within that within that context of story. Um, yeah, because all the comics have been so good.
Yeah, I think it's also one of the most, I think, curated books artistically out on the shelves since its inception. Like there's a certain style that fits in with that Lemire writing, that I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
artists can do. Like it wouldn't, like I I wouldn't want to see a Jim Lee on like a Jeff Lemire book. You know what I mean? Like or something like
Right, right,
that,
right.
like just like it just it's a very like very cool thing that has its place.
Yeah, and Dean Ormston, who co-created Black Hammer with Jeff
Mhm.
Lemire, like his work is so beautiful and was so continually inspiring. Like that, like almost every page, I would find myself like opening up some of those Dean Ormston pages for
Yeah.
inspiration again. Not that my stuff really looks like his at all,
Mhm.
but he's just so good at capturing this kind of like moody gothic,
Yeah.
almost, with like some art deco in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So like that kind of that specific type of like a horror vibe that he can bring to
Mhm.
a superhero book, um I think just feels so cool. Like it's just such a great atmospheric reading experience. So that was always kind of the my challenge, was to try and like hopefully try and meet that level of atmosphere
Yeah.
that he was able to do. But yeah, there have been so many great artists that have worked on the series in various forms, so it's can be intimidating sometimes.
I can imagine. I can imagine. But, that's part of the job, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Uh
it's also part of the fun. Like it's intimidating, but it's also like you have a little bit of a competitive spirit, so you're like, I want to do as good a job as
right.
like I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
try
yeah,
and
yeah.
really
You
like
really want to knock it out of the park.
yeah, yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Right now, I'm doing so talking about an incredible tradition of comics. Matt and I are working on a story for EC Comics.
Oh, cool.
They Oni just recently announced that they were reviving EC as a publishing new comics, and
Wow.
so they're doing a new anthology science fiction series called Cruel Universe.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and I've recently turned in a cover for that, and we're set to write at least one story. um, yeah, so we're just sort of working on that, and then Matt and I, we did Ancestor a while ago, and in
Mhm.
my mind, Ancestor is still sort of the our personal high watermark in terms of like stuff that we've done together, where we
Uh,
wrote it and drew it and lettered it. Um, so we're working on a follow up to
very cool.
not in the same universe as that, a new story,
Mhm.
but kind of our next comic that we do in that same kind of style.
Kind of like a
So that'll
spiritual
be
successor
exciting.
almost.
Yeah, just similar, process, and the way
Mhm.
that we collaborate on both the writing and the art and everything like that.
That's rad, man.
Yeah,
Let's do a couple more and then I'll get you out of here. I'm sure you got a lot of stuff
sure
to
thing.
do. Um, as far as like I hate asking this question, but I'm gonna ask it because I feel like I want to know because I'm a big nerd. Dream project.
Oh man.
Mm.
Well, there's, you know what, in a lot of ways, a dream project, and I say this because it
Mm.
really is sort of like, I really don't know that it's ever the kind of thing that can
Uh,
happen. But I think one of the big dream projects would be to do a new Star Trek comic with a new crew on a new ship where I can kind of, do exactly the type of Star Trek story that I've always wanted to make. So that would definitely be a huge one. And then there's there's so many superhero characters that I love that it's like there's certain things where
mm.
you just know, like, oh, I have like a take on that hasn't
Yeah.
quite been done, but I think people would really like it. Would be really fun. So like I
Mm.
have one for Ghost Rider, which is
Oh, awesome.
sort of a surprise, like uh not necessarily the first thing you would think of for my work, but like
Mhm.
Ghost Rider, I love Dr. Fate,
Sweet.
and I love Silver Surfer.
Yeah.
uh there's a whole host of kind of those, not necessarily the biggest characters,
I would honestly
but
argue
ones that I feel well suited towards, and love just the kind of look of them, even you know
yeah,
that alone. Yeah.
three of the toughest characters I think to write, in my opinion. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Ghost Rider, and I feel like he's like a very tough character to write, but also maybe simple at some point, because you know, he's a dude, he's a
Yeah.
flaming guy on a motorcycle, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I've loved a ton of. It's not like there haven't been great Ghost Rider comics. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
right now, the Benjamin Percy Ghost Rider stuff is so
It's
cool.
pretty gnarly, yeah.
Um, yeah. So there's great stuff like that. I think Ghost Rider is one of those characters that is well suited to like one-off stories a lot. Like,
Yeah.
if you've ever, do you know the movie High Plains Drifter, the
Yeah,
Clint
yeah, yeah,
Eastwood?
absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I think, like, to me that's the kind of story that like
Okay.
can be a Ghost Rider story. And you can sort of have endless iterations of that kind of thing. A man
Oh
comes to
yeah.
town sort of stories. Yeah.
What would be your Ghost Rider there? Would it be Danny Ketch, Rob Reyes? Would it be Johnny Blaze?
I
Or just like
mean,
everybody?
I would do I'm blanking on the name. I would do like 1950. It would be
Oh, cool.
World War II vet back home. Um, another movie is referenced. This is like a total left field, but there's the William Wyler movie, "The Best Years of Our Lives," which is,
Okay.
he was a World War II veteran. A lot of the people in the movie are World War II veterans.
Hmm.
It's made. I mean, the movie came out, I think, like 6 months after World War II ended, and it's
Wow.
just about these guys coming home. Incredible, just sort of drama.
Mm.
Um, and so like that is very inspiring to me. Like the sort of uh how do I say it? Like that kind of like unmoored, like they kind of don't know what direction their life is going to take. Like that
Yeah.
to me mixes very well with the like early motorcycle culture
Yeah,
of
yeah,
of the
for
late
sure.
40s, early 50s. Um, like that to me syncs
Mhm.
up with like the idea of one of those guys being Ghost Rider is
That's really
something that
cool.
I think
That's
is really
honestly
cool.
really
Yeah,
cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's, I'd
yeah,
be in on it. I hope Marvel calls you up and says, we need that Ghost Rider story."
yeah. Well, like I said, it's another one of those like dream ones because it's
Mm.
hard for me to imagine the specific circumstances arising where
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that would be something that people would want. Um, but yeah, that would be a really fun kind of thing to do. And who knows? I mean, probably what will actually happen is that I'll eventually give up or give in and do a thinly veiled version of Ghost Rider is, you know, copyright safe.
Right. Ryder the
Yeah,
Ghost.
yeah, yeah,
Stuff like that. Cool, man. Listen, that's awesome. Thank you for doing this. Do you want to plug anything? Like, where can people find you?
yeah. I mean, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and all that kind of stuff, just at Malachi Ward. And then I don't know when this is coming out, but I'm going to Emerald City in a few weeks, or a couple weeks. And then I'm also going to C2E2. I've never done that show before,
Oh,
but yeah,
very
I'll be in
cool.
Chicago
That's a fun show.
later in April. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've never even been to Chicago before, so I'm really excited.
Chicago's fun, man. Like
Yeah.
if you like to eat and drink and walk around, like it's a great city, man. Like it's clean too. You know, like
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah.
that's why I always because I grew up in New York and I'm like whenever I go to Chicago, I'm like, wow, this is like how clean New York should be. You know, like there's nothing on the streets. I'm like, wow, this is wild. You know, but yeah, Chicago's fun, man. Cool. That's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
And there we go. Malachi's a great guy. He's welcome back anytime he wants. Plus, he's going to be at Emerald City Comic Con this weekend. This is going to be posted on Saturday. If you're out there, go say hi to him. Tons of great writers and artists are out there, tons of great creatives. It should be a fun show. I wish I was there. Or I wish I was going. I've never been to Emerald City. That's one of the cons that I've always wanted to go to. Listen, my books of the week this week Avengers Twilight #3. Holy jeez, is this Chip Zdarsky's Kingdom Come version of Avengers. I love a future forward story when it's well done. The first 3 books in the series have been nothing but bangers. The third one is fantastic. I love me a grizzled Captain America that kind of looks like a combination of Robert Redford and Clint Eastwood. Really highly recommend it. Go check it out. I also recommend, I think I mentioned it last week, this new Wolverine series, which is like a Sabretooth War that's going for like 10 issues. Really brutal stuff. Marvel is implementing a mature readers line at some point, or they're making some of their books for more mature readers. I think this Wolverine is the litmus test. It's a fantastic story. It's really brutal. It's got all the cool over the top Wolverine stuff that you're expecting, I guess, now in like 2024. It's really good. Side note, Cosmic Detective, Jeff Lemire, Matt Kint, the trade paperback. Love it. It's a little. I think it was a Comixology book. They collected it. I finally got around to reading it. Really cool stuff. If you love Jack Kirby designs and God's insanity, you're gonna really dig Cosmic Detective. Another book of the week that I really loved is Titan put out Savage Sword of Conan #1, which is very reminiscent of the old Savage Swords of Conan from back in the day. Now, this book with I believe, a $6.99 price point, printed on newsprint, really cool stuff. I believe Jim Zub has a short story in it. Roy Thomas does an intro. Pat Zurcher does an insane Solomon Kane story in it. And you know what? I feel like I'm the last one to catch on to Solomon Kane. When I was younger, I'd always see like really older comic guys. You know the guys I'm talking about, who were like really into Solomon Kane, and I'd always be like, I don't get it. Now, as an adult, I'm not saying I'm a super older comic guy. I'm in my 40s, early 40s. I'm very intrigued. I'm in it. I started reading some Solomon Kane. I think it's you can get some for free because of whatever royalty lapse or whatever it is. It's like you can get those older books for free. I think you can read all the Conan books and like the John Carter books for free also. Anyway, that's besides the point. Solomon Kane, who knew? That Pat Zurcher story is fantastic. There's a lot of great content in that Savage Sword of Conan that came out this week. If you want like sword and sorcery, you don't really have time to pick up like your monthly books. You can't really catch up on like, say, something that's been running for 45 years. And you like adventure. I've said that a couple of times. Go get that Savage Sword of Conan book. And if you want to hear more thoughts on Conan, I do a podcast with my buddy Alex called Film Class Zeros, and we did a fantastic Conan the Barbarian episode, which I think you guys should check out. I'll leave the link below. And also, listen, this weekend is Sting's last match. Not Sting the singer, but Sting, the man called Sting, at AEW Revolution. Now, my Matt Men partner, Andrew Zarin, and I have talked about this for the last few weeks. This episode is dropping Saturday night, so tomorrow go watch the AEW Revolution, man or woman. Check it out. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think about Sting? What are some of your favorite Sting moments? Leave it in the comments below. You can reach me at BTC Rich on Twitter, and this channel is BTC Rich X. Please subscribe. Tell all your friends. I'm trying to make this cooler and better thing in 2024. We're going to have a lot more wrestling talk, a lot more art, a lot more comics. You never know who's going to show up. I'm trying to get some cool people. I'm trying to get some sponsorships and some affiliation stuff. So stay tuned, guys. Love you. Mwah. Bye.